What if the man you risked everything for your job, your reputation, your future turned out to be a liar? What if the love letters, the stolen kisses, the whispered dreams of a life together were all part of his game? A 25-year-old correctional officer, a charming, quiet inmate with 2 years left to serve. They fell in love behind bars. Secret rendezvous, disabled cameras, night visits inside a locked cell. She got pregnant and thought it was a miracle, but when she tried to plan their future, she discovered he already had one. Wife, kids, a whole life outside these walls, and she, just a lonely chapter in his prison story. 2 weeks later, he was dead, and what the prison investigation uncovered shocked everyone. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's about how love, obsession, and vengeance turned a prison romance into a national scandal. Sarah Whitmore was only 25 when she took the job. Fresh out of training, fresh out of heartbreak. She needed something steady, something that gave her a sense of control. Working as a correctional officer in a medium-security prison wasn't exactly a dream come true, but it was a job. And in her small Arkansas town, that meant everything. Day one, she walked through the gates of Ridgefield Correctional Facility wearing her uniform crisp and her name tag shining like she had something to prove. Everyone around her had years of experience, hardened faces, unshaken eyes. But Sarah, she still believed in people. She believed in fairness, structure, second chances. That was her first mistake. They assigned her to the night shift, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., the time when the prison felt the most like a graveyard. Long hallways, dim lights, buzzing intercoms, and the distant clang of steel doors. Most guards hated night duty, but Sarah preferred it. It was quiet, predictable. She didn't have to deal with arrogant sergeants barking orders or inmates pretending to slip just to grab attention. At night, she could breathe. And that was when she noticed him. Ethan Cole, 30 years old, inmate ID number 65391, booked 3 years ago for aggravated assault after a bar fight in Little Rock turned into a hospital visit for the other guy. He had 2 years left on a 5-year sentence. Tall, with dark hair, square jaw, and a kind of calm that didn't match the environment he was in. He wasn't loud. He didn't stir up trouble. He read books, kept to himself. And unlike other inmates who whistled or threw crude comments when Sarah walked past, Ethan simply nodded, respectful, distant, a mystery. At first, it was nothing, just a mental note. Cell block D, third cell to the left, the quiet one. But over the weeks, something changed. Sarah found herself pausing a little longer at his cell during rounds. He'd sometimes look up from his book. Their eyes would meet, and for a split second, it felt like the world outside the prison existed again. She told herself it was nothing, a harmless moment, but she couldn't deny it. There was a warmth in his eyes that no one else had offered her in months. Ethan never asked for anything, not like the others. He never pushed, but he noticed. He noticed when Sarah changed her hairstyle. He noticed when she walked with a limp one night after twisting her ankle. Rough night, he asked gently, breaking his usual silence. She laughed, just once, and it echoed louder than she meant it to. After that, the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. When she walked by, she could feel his gaze linger. When she stood near his cell, her pulse ticked faster. She'd never felt this way at work, never even considered it. But somehow, Ethan wasn't just another inmate anymore. He was different. One evening, during her usual patrol, she found a folded piece of paper wedged near the bottom of his door. She picked it up, half expecting it to be another inmate complaint, but when she unfolded it, her heart stuttered. "You deserve someone who sees you, not just the uniform." That was all it said. No name, no signature, but she knew. Oh God, she knew. She should have reported it, should have thrown it away. But instead, she slipped it into her back pocket and kept walking, pretending her hands weren't shaking. From that night on, the rules began to blur. She brought him an extra snack during dinner shift. Nothing major, just an unopened granola bar she accidentally left on the tray. She started letting him out into the common area for 5 extra minutes after lights out, saying he needed to cool down after a nightmare. Every favor came with a look, a silent thank you, a bond growing in the shadows. Sarah told herself she was just being kind, but deep down, she knew it wasn't kindness. It was connection. In a place designed to strip everyone of humanity, Ethan made her feel seen. He never touched her, not yet, but the tension between them could have cut steel. Then came the night that changed everything. A violent storm hit the town, wind howling, rain lashing against the windows like fists. Power flickered twice, then went out for 20 full minutes. The backup generator kicked in, but not before the cameras glitched across cell block D. Sarah, already nervous from the weather, checked on every cell by flashlight. When she reached Ethan's, he was sitting by the bars, eyes locked on hers. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I am now," he said. The words weren't dramatic, but they stayed with her all night. Later, she replayed the moment in her head again and again, lying in her small apartment bed, curled under thin sheets. She didn't sleep. She thought about his voice, the calm in it, the way it made her feel something other than numb. And that was the night she started writing in a notebook. Not official reports, not security logs, but her own thoughts. Why does he make me feel safer than anyone else ever has? Is this wrong if it's real? No one would understand with 80. But I think I'm falling. Sarah didn't know it then, but she wasn't just walking a dangerous line. She had already crossed it. In prison, the first rule for correctional officers is simple. Do not get personal with inmates. No gifts, no favors, no relationships. It is the line that separates order from chaos. And Sarah knew that. She signed a dozen documents swearing she understood it. But by the time she wrote Ethan's name in the margin of her notebook, surrounded by hearts, that line was already long gone. It started small, always small. She began assigning herself to Ethan's block more often. At first, it was coincidence. Then, it was choice. If someone else tried to switch schedules with her, she found a reason to decline. If another officer walked rounds in cell block D, she made sure she was there too. Always near, always watching. Ethan never pushed. He never asked for more than she offered, and that made her fall even harder. He didn't act like the other inmates. No manipulation, no threats. He just looked at her like she was human. And Sarah, who had always felt invisible outside these concrete walls, began to crave that attention more than anything else. One night, while handing out bedtime medication, Sarah lingered by his cell a little longer than usual. He stood close to the bars, so close she could smell his soap, plain institutional stuff, but somehow it smelled warm on him. "You shouldn't be here this late," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not exactly going anywhere," she joked. He smiled, not the usual playful smirk, but something soft, familiar, like he'd known her all his life. She meant to walk away, but her hand brushed his when she passed him the cup of water. Just for a second, a spark jumped through her skin like static. Neither of them moved. And then, just as quickly, it was over. She finished rounds like nothing had happened, but inside, her chest was pounding. That night, she wrote, "I felt something. I know he did too. God, what am I doing?" The next few days blurred together. Sarah started bending the rules more boldly. A snack here, an extra shower token there. She found herself checking the camera feed and turning it off for maintenance during her shifts. No one questioned her. She was quiet, reliable, the last person anyone would suspect. During one of those dark zones, Ethan slipped her a folded note. It read, "Do you really want to do this?" She stared at it for hours. Then finally, she wrote back, "I already have." From there was no going back. Every night, while the rest of the prison slept under flickering lights and thick silence, Sarah and Ethan built a world just for the two of them. It wasn't physical, not yet, but it was more intimate than anything Sarah had ever experienced. They talked about life, about regrets, about what they would do if they had one more chance. She told him about her childhood in Oklahoma, her mother's depression, her ex-boyfriend who cheated, the years of trying to prove herself to people who never really saw her. And Ethan. Ethan told her about the night he was arrested. It was a stupid fight. He said, "A guy hit on my girlfriend. I overreacted. One punch too hard and boom, he's in the ICU. I didn't mean to, but nobody cares what I meant. Just what I did." He said it with guilt in his eyes, regret, vulnerability, and Sarah believed every word. She told herself she wasn't falling for a criminal. She was falling for a man who made a mistake, a man who saw her, trusted her, who wanted to build a life with her. Soon, they weren't just talking. They were whispering through the bars, brushing hands deliberately. Once, she slipped her hand through the narrow slot in the door, and he kissed her fingers so gently it made her knees shake. The first kiss, the real one, happened in the utility closet. She'd brought him there under the pretense of checking a broken light. With the cameras off and the door closed, their mouths found each other like magnets. It was desperate. It was wrong. It was unforgettable. And from that moment, their love wasn't just secret, it was forbidden. They began meeting weekly. Sarah learned how to shut down specific feeds in the security system and reroute footage. Sometimes she'd stay past her shift, claiming overtime, just to sneak into his cell after lights out. Ethan kept a makeshift calendar. Every visit was marked with a small dot in the corner of his book. The dots began to multiply. So did the risks. One night, she snuck in with a bag of vending machine snacks and a handwritten note. "When you get out, let's run away. No one needs to know." Ethan stared at the note for a long time. Then he nodded slowly, smiling. "Yeah," he said, "just you and me." Sarah believed him. She started imagining wedding dresses, baby names. She began Googling small towns in California where no one would know who they were. She wasn't just fallen anymore. She had fallen. Hard. The line wasn't blurred anymore. It was erased. And yet, for all her dreams, for all her whispered promises, Sarah never asked the one question that would have saved her. Was she the only one? The first sign was a missed period. Sarah noticed it one morning during roll call. She'd been so tired lately, more than usual. Nauseous, too. Her stomach twisted at smells she used to ignore: the bleach in the hallway, the greasy breakfast trays, even her own coffee. She tried to brush it off. Stress, maybe. Lack of sleep. Hormones out of whack from too many night shifts. But something in her gut, a whisper, a pulse, a flutter, kept telling her this was different. She bought a pregnancy test at a gas station 30 miles away, where no one would recognize her in uniform. Drove home, locked the bathroom door, sat on the edge of the tub, shaking. It didn't even take a full minute. 2 pink lines. She stared at them, frozen. Then slowly, her hand flew to her mouth. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, trembling, as reality hit her like a tidal wave. She was pregnant. With Ethan's child. For a long moment, the world went quiet, like someone had pressed pause on the noise outside. All the doubts she'd tried to silence, all the warnings she'd ignored, melted into the background, because in that moment, she was happy. She imagined his reaction, the way his eyes would soften, how he'd take her hands and pull her close. She pictured the three of them: Ethan, her, and the baby. A new start, a second chance for them both, a miracle born out of darkness. She waited 3 days to tell him. 3 days of butterflies and wild dreams, of fingers tracing her stomach in the mirror and wondering if it would be a boy or girl. She didn't think about the consequences, the risk, the prison rules, the law. all of that disappeared beneath a tidal wave of longing. It was a Thursday night when she finally told him. She came during her rounds, like always, shut off the corridor cameras, slipped into his cell with the practiced calm of someone who had done it a dozen times before. But this time, she was glowing. "I have something to tell you," she whispered, voice shaking with excitement. Ethan was lying on the lower bunk, reading. He looked up, slightly puzzled. I'm pregnant," she said. The words hung in the air like fog. At first, he didn't respond. He just blinked. Once, twice. Then, slowly, he sat up. "You're sure?" She nodded quickly. "I took 2 tests. It wasn't planned. But maybe it's meant to be. Maybe this is a sign." A long silence followed. He smiled, or at least he tried to. Wow," he said. "That's a lot." Sarah's heart sank a little at his tone. "Isn't it a good thing?" she asked, trying to read his face. Yeah, it is. I just didn't expect it." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead, gentle, measured, but his arms were stiff, his breath shallow. Sarah tried not to notice. But that night, she cried herself to sleep. Over the next few days, Ethan changed. He became distant, less talkative, less affectionate. He said he was just processing everything, that the news hit him hard, but he'd come around, and Sarah believed him. At least, she tried to. But doubt began to gnaw at her. Why wasn't he excited? Why didn't he want to talk about names or the future? Why didn't he ask how she was feeling, or if she'd been to a doctor? Something was off. One night, she caught him tearing up a piece of paper, something he'd been writing, and flushing it down the toilet. She asked what it was. He said it was nothing, a poem that wasn't working. She didn't believe him. Sarah's instincts kicked in, the same instincts that kept her alive in a prison full of men who lied for a living. So she started digging. It began with a quick glance at his visitor log. He hadn't had any visitors in over a year. That made her feel better until she checked his inmate contact sheet. A name stood out: Lena Cole. "Who's Lena?" she asked him casually the next night. He shrugged. "My cousin. We used to be close." She nodded, didn't press. But later, in the break room, she pulled his file from the database. Buried deep in the emergency contact form in faded ink were the words: Spouse Lena Cole, child Mason Cole, age 5. Her blood went cold. Her hands shook as she opened a browser and searched Facebook on her personal phone. It didn't take long. Lena Cole, a pretty brunette in her early 30s, married, smiling in every photo, holding hands with a little boy in cowboy boots who looked exactly like Ethan. Photos dated just before his arrest, and one from last Christmas showed Lena and Mason visiting what looked like a prison, behind the fencing, in front of a gray wall. A handwritten caption: "Daddy says he'll be home soon." Sarah couldn't breathe. She stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the betrayal crawling through her veins. All those nights, all those promises, all the whispers of a future together. It was all a lie. She wasn't his miracle. She was a distraction. A side story. A fool. She smashed her phone against the counter and screamed so loud, the officer in the next hallway came running. She blamed it on cramps. Then went back to work like nothing had happened. But something inside her had snapped. This wasn't heartbreak. It was rage. Sarah didn't eat for 2 days. She showed up to work on time, completed her rounds, smiled when necessary, but inside, she was falling apart. She couldn't look at Ethan without seeing the faces of Lena and Mason, couldn't hear his voice without remembering his lies. Every I love you, every promise, every whispered dream about a future, all of it had been a performance. And she had been the stage. The baby growing inside her felt like a cruel joke. She had believed she was special, that she was the one person who had reached through the prison bars and touched something real in Ethan. But the truth was undeniable now. She was just another chapter in a story he had already written, a dark, secret chapter no one was supposed to find. She began avoiding him, kept her distance during rounds, stopped turning off the cameras. She told herself she needed time. But in reality, she was watching him, studying him, looking for cracks in the version of Ethan she thought she knew. And the cracks came quickly. He didn't chase her, didn't ask what was wrong. He went about his routines as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't shared something sacred that, more than anything else, broke her heart. One night, she stayed late to review security logs, something she'd never bothered with before. That's when she saw it. A flagged alert from 2 months earlier, unauthorized access to the library wing during lights out. Time 2:14 a.m. Camera offline. Area Supervisor Officer Sarah Whitmore. That was the night she first kissed Ethan. She realized then the system had been logging her every move, and if she could find it, so could others. She began deleting logs, clearing audit trails, rewriting camera rotations manually. Her hands moved fast, her eyes sharp. She didn't panic. She planned. At home, she started keeping a second journal, not about love, about revenge. She wrote down every instance of Ethan lying, every clue she had missed. She reread every note he had written her, now seeing the hollow flattery between the lines. One entry read, "He didn't love me. He never did, why? He saw a lonely girl with keys and a weak spot for fairy tales." Another, "He made me a criminal. I'll make him pay." She still spoke to Ethan occasionally, but something in her voice had changed. It was softer, sweeter, even, and Ethan, the fool that he was, took it as forgiveness. "Maybe we just need to reset," he said during one of their short conversations. "Get back to who we were." She smiled. "Yeah, that sounds nice." But behind the smile, she was counting the days. The pregnancy was now 8 weeks along. Her belly hadn't changed much yet, just a slight bloating she could hide under her uniform. No one at the prison knew, not even the medical unit. She planned to keep it that way for as long as possible. Because she had a decision to make. One night, while lying in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow, hypnotic circles, a thought came to her, cold, clear, final. If he doesn't get out of prison, he'll never be forced to choose. He wouldn't have to explain to his wife, wouldn't have to face the consequences. He could go right back to his perfect little life when his sentence ended, pretend Sarah and the baby never existed. But if he died in prison, he would die with the truth. He would die knowing he wasn't in control anymore. The thought didn't make her smile. It didn't make her cry, either. It just settled in her chest like a stone at the bottom of a lake, heavy, still. From that moment, she stopped journaling. She started preparing. She memorized the camera blind spots that no one else knew about, the ones she had manipulated herself. She watched other correctional officers to learn their patterns, when they smoked, when they slacked off, when they vanished for long stretches behind closed doors. She even made small talk with the janitor, asking what cleaning supplies they used in cell block D, what was strongest, what didn't leave a smell. She began printing out diagrams of the facility at home, marking them, mapping the way out, not because she planned to run, but because she wanted control. She wanted to know every inch of the place where her life had fallen apart. Then came the final straw. She overheard Ethan on the phone. She wasn't supposed to, but she had quietly rerouted one of the tap-in lines to her monitor, just in case. It was Lena. Sarah listened from the break room, the receiver shaking in her hand. "I miss you," Ethan said. "I know it's been hard, but I'll be home soon. Just keep holding on." Sarah couldn't breathe. She pressed the earpiece tighter, praying she'd misheard. "You should see Mason's drawings," Lena said, laughing softly. "He keeps drawing us as a family, you, me, and him. He still thinks you're Superman." Sarah dropped the phone. She didn't scream this time. She didn't cry. She just walked to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, and whispered, "You're not taking this from me." That night, she wrote one final note in her personal notebook, the one she hadn't touched in weeks, just 4 words centered on the page. "He dies in here." On paper, Sarah Whitmore was a model employee. She was punctual, polite, never took sick days. She showed up early, stayed late, never caused drama. In a workplace where burnout and cynicism were the norm, she still nodded good morning and asked people how they were doing. That was her greatest weapon, because no one suspected the storm brewing behind her calm smile. By the 3rd week after she found out about Lena and the child, Sarah had shifted entirely into a different version of herself. On the outside, she seemed better, happier, like she and Ethan had made up. She even started visiting him again, small interactions during shift changes, quiet greetings during meal rounds, friendly, but not too friendly. But inside, she was studying him like prey. Everything he did, everything he said, became data, measured, calculated. She started keeping mental notes instead of written ones, because written things could be found, but memory, that was hers alone. And she remembered everything. The way he always stretched right before lying down, pulling the muscles in his neck like he was trying to shake something off. The way he tucked the edge of his blanket under his feet, even when it was hot. The exact time he fell asleep, usually 12:15 a.m., unless it was movie night, then closer to 1. She also remembered the prison's maintenance logs, especially the ones she had access to modify. She filed a request to have Cell Block D's external cameras service citing recurrent signal interference. She assigned herself to that block 2 nights later. She made sure she was the one with keys to the janitor's closet that night, not for cleaning, but because it held industrial-strength plastic gloves, disinfectant strong enough to burn through paint, and a roll of extra pillowcases no one ever inventoried. And she waited. 1 night, 2 nights, 3, until it was a Sunday. Sundays were always understaffed. She came in early, checked every corner, turned on every smile, handed out coffee, asked one of the officers if he wanted her to cover his last round, said she owed him a favor. He shrugged and handed it off without hesitation. It was 1:07 a.m. when she stepped into the corridor of Cell Block D alone. Cameras offline, doors secured, lights dimmed to night mode. She walked slowly, steady. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breath didn't waver. At Ethan's cell, she paused. He was already asleep, lying on his side, one hand curled under his pillow. For a moment, she just stood there, watching him through the glass. So peaceful, so still. And that made her angry. Because she had spent the last month crying, shaking, throwing up from stress and pregnancy, while he slept like nothing ever happened, like she was already a memory. She used her override key. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. She stepped inside, closed it behind her. The room was cold. She stood over him in silence, a long silence, long enough that she thought maybe she'd walk away, Maybe this was punishment enough, knowing she could take his life and choosing not to. But then Ethan stirred. His eyes opened just barely and he blinked. "Sarah," he mumbled, groggy. She didn't answer. "Everything okay?" he asked, sitting up slightly. That was his last question. Sarah moved quickly, a practiced grip, one hand over his mouth, the other wrapping the pillowcase around his neck and yanking backward hard. He thrashed for a moment, instinctively, but sleep had left him weak. And she was determined. His legs kicked once. Then again. Then nothing. It was done in less than 40 seconds. She stood there, panting, staring at his lifeless body. His eyes were still open, his lips slightly parted, but his chest no longer rose. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away. Then reset. She positioned his body just as she found it on his side, one hand under the pillow. She straightened the blanket, smoothed out the folds, and carefully placed the pillow under his head again. To anyone else, it would look like he died in his sleep. She exited the cell, locked it behind her, walked back to the hallway like nothing had happened, discarded the gloves and pillowcase in a garbage bag at the end of the corridor, ready for incineration. At 1:39 a.m., she radioed in a system check on the cameras. At 1:52 a.m., she signed off her round. By 2:10 a.m., she was sitting in the break room, sipping decaf and humming softly to herself. At 6:04 a.m., a different officer did morning checks and found Ethan Cole unresponsive. An ambulance was called. Paramedics tried to resuscitate him for 12 minutes before declaring time of death 6:24 a.m. Cause of death suspected cardiac arrest during sleep. There were no marks on his body, no bruises, no signs of violence. Just one man, dead in his cell. And one woman, calm, quiet, waiting. When the morning shift found Ethan Cole's body, they followed protocol to the letter. They secured the area, called medical, logged the discovery time, notified the warden. Sarah was already off shift by then, sipping coffee at home with her legs curled beneath her and her uniform folded neatly over a chair. She watched the clock tick toward 8 a.m., knew exactly what was happening. At 8:37 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was a group message from the officer group chat. "Cole, D block, found dead. Natural causes wild." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "He seemed fine last night. That's awful." No emojis, just enough to sound human. By noon, word had spread across the facility. A death in custody was rare, especially without warning, especially someone as young as Ethan. But because the body showed no signs of trauma, and because his history included high blood pressure, the preliminary report from the prison's doctor leaned toward cardiac arrest. The warden didn't push for an immediate external investigation. Too much paperwork, too much press. The state required an autopsy. Yes, but that could take weeks. And if the story died before the media caught wind, all the better. But then something changed. A janitor came forward. 3 days after Ethan's death, while taking inventory of discarded cleaning supplies, he noticed an empty bottle of industrial cleaner had been logged out, but not signed back in. A bottle that should have lasted 3 weeks was gone in one night. He mentioned it casually to his supervisor. The supervisor filed a routine report. That report crossed the desk of Officer Neil Rumsfeld, Internal Affairs Liaison. Rumsfeld was the kind of man who saw ghosts in shadows, paranoid, meticulous, retired cop turned prison watchdog. Most people rolled their eyes when he dug into things, but not this time. He started asking questions. Who had access to the cleaning supply closet that night? Whose badge was logged at 1:07 a.m. outside D block? Why were the corridor cameras offline for nearly 30 minutes? Those questions led to a single name. Officer Sarah Whitmore. Rumsfeld requested her shift logs. He noticed that she had requested camera maintenance twice in 1 month, both times in the same corridor, both during her assigned shifts. He pulled archived footage from the day before Ethan's death. Nothing unusual. But the night of missing, he double-checked the system timestamps. The cameras weren't malfunctioning. They had been turned off manually. He pulled Sarah's keycard log. Access to D Block 1:07 a.m. Access to janitor's closet 12:48 a.m. Return to admin wing 1:52 a.m. The window lined up exactly with the presumed time of death. Still, it wasn't enough. Circumstantial, could be coincidence, could be routine. Then came the second blow. Sarah had left her notebook, her first one, in her locker. During a routine locker sweep by Internal Affairs triggered by Rumsfeld's request, the journal was found. It wasn't hidden, just tucked beneath a sweater. They opened it. Read every page. It wasn't a confession, not exactly, but it was damning. He says he loves me, but I know he lies. He has a wife and child. I gave him everything, and he gave me nothing. He doesn't get to walk away. Rumsfeld brought the journal to the warden. The warden froze. For the first time since the death, he authorized a full internal investigation. Sarah was brought in for questioning under the guise of a routine debriefing. She walked into the room calm, collected, dressed in her uniform, ponytail tight. She didn't blink when they laid the journal on the table. She didn't flinch when they asked about the cleaning supply logs. But her voice, always steady, quivered ever so slightly when Rumsfeld leaned in and said, "Did you love him?" That was the crack. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. Sarah answered, "I thought he loved me too." Rumsfeld didn't say another word. He just stood up and left the room. By the next day, the prison brought in the state police. An autopsy was ordered immediately, no more delays. The body had been preserved, and though it showed no bruises or wounds, a deeper forensic scan revealed signs of asphyxiation, a small fracture in the hyoid bone, slight redness beneath the jawline, hidden beneath stubble. Not natural causes. Not even close. Sarah was arrested 2 days later. She didn't resist. Didn't cry. She was booked at the same facility she used to patrol. Pregnant, alone, and silent. When asked if she wanted a lawyer, she nodded once, and said only one sentence before they led her away. He deserved worse. The moment Sarah Whitmore was charged with second-degree murder, the headlines exploded. Pregnant guard kills inmate lover. Shocking prison scandal in Arkansas. Betrayal behind bars. The forbidden affair that ended in murder. She loved him. Then she killed him. Local news picked it up first. Then came the national outlets. Talk shows, podcasts, Twitter threads dissecting every angle. Was she a predator, a victim, a mentally unstable woman pushed too far? Photos of Sarah in uniform were plastered across TV screens. Cold expression, hands cuffed, the faint curve of pregnancy just beginning to show beneath the loose fabric of her jumpsuit. It didn't take long for the courtroom to fill with reporters, legal analysts, even curious locals who had followed the drama from the beginning. Everyone wanted a seat. The prosecution came out swinging. They painted Sarah as calculated, manipulative, dangerously obsessive. She used her authority to gain access to this inmate. The district attorney said during opening statements, she abused her power, she violated her oath, and when her fantasy began to unravel, she silenced the one person who knew the truth. They displayed photos of Ethan's body, autopsy diagrams, security logs, the handwritten journal, enlarged and projected onto a screen for the jury. They even called a former inmate, one who had served in the same block, to testify. She always gave him extra stuff, the man said. Extra pudding, more time in the yard. We all noticed it. We just didn't say nothing 'cause, well, she was nice. But the defense had their own story to tell. They didn't deny the relationship. In fact, they leaned into it. They called it a tragic love story, the tale of a young woman who fell for the wrong man in the wrong place. She was lonely, her lawyer said. She was vulnerable, and she was used. They brought up Ethan's secret marriage, the child, the lies. Ethan Cole presented himself as single, as reformed, as a man planning a future with Sarah Whitmore, the lawyer said. But in truth, he was playing a game, one that cost him his life and nearly cost her everything. They argued that Sarah was not a monster, but a heartbroken pregnant woman, abandoned and humiliated by someone who manipulated her for over a year. And when it came time for Sarah to testify, the courtroom held its breath. She took the stand slowly, her belly now visibly swollen under a pale blue maternity dress provided by the county jail. She didn't cry. Her voice was soft, controlled. "I loved him," she said. "I really did. I thought we had something real." She described how they met, how the relationship grew, how she found out about his wife. Her voice cracked only once when she talked about the baby. "I didn't mean to kill him," she said, eyes downcast. "I went to his cell to talk, to ask him why he lied. But when he laughed at me, when he said I was just a phase, something in me snapped. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't myself." The room went silent. Some jurors looked away. Others stared straight at her, searching for remorse, or maybe truth. Then the prosecutor stood. "Miss Whitmore, you say he laughed at you. Was there any recording of that conversation?" "No," she said quietly. "Were there any witnesses?" "No." "Did he threaten you, hurt you in any way?" "No," she whispered. "So, you killed him because he didn't love you the way you wanted him to?" Sarah didn't answer. That silence echoed louder than any outburst. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for 3. On the 4th morning, they filed back into the courtroom. The foreman stood. The judge asked the question, and the answer came. "We find the defendant, Sarah Whitmore, guilty of second-degree murder." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Some nodded, others shook their heads. Sarah blinked once, but otherwise didn't move. The judge set sentencing for the following month, but as the gavel fell, everyone knew she was not going home. Not now, not ever. She was led out in silence, shackled, her steps slow under the weight of her unborn child. And as the courtroom emptied, a reporter whispered into her mic, "There are no happy endings here, only a baby born into the ruins of a forbidden love." 1 month later, Sarah Whitmore stood once again before the court, this time, not for judgment of guilt, but for judgment of time. Her pregnancy was now in its final trimester. The soft curve under her belly had grown heavy and full, and even her prison uniform had been adjusted to fit. Her wrists were shackled in front of her. Her ankles, unshackled only at the judge's request, swelled visibly under the strain of weight and heat. She didn't look around the courtroom. Not at the reporters. Not at the jurors who'd once stared through her like glass. Not even at the woman sitting quietly in the back row, Lena Cole, Ethan's widow, holding the hand of her 5-year-old son who didn't fully understand what they were doing there. She just looked down, tired, hollowed out. Her defense team asked for leniency. They cited her mental health, the trauma, the fact that she was pregnant with the victim's child, that she'd never had a prior offense, that this wasn't premeditated, but a crime of passion rooted in emotional despair, not malice. But the prosecution disagreed. She had power, the DA argued. She had keys, she had control, and she used every tool at her disposal to orchestrate a clean, quiet, undetectable murder. That's not passion, that's calculation. The judge listened, took a long pause, and then handed down the sentence. 25 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for the first 18. Gasps, shuffling feet, a low murmur that rippled through the rows of pews like thunder. Sarah showed no reaction. Only when the gavel came down, only when the moment became real, did her hand drift, instinctively, to her stomach. The life inside her kept moving. And Sarah, she was now still, forever. The baby was born 7 weeks later. A girl. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, dark hair, long fingers, no name on the birth certificate, just baby Whitmore. The prison allowed Sarah to hold her for 22 hours. That's all the time the state permitted for female inmates who weren't granted family custody. Sarah didn't speak much during those hours. She just held her, rocked her gently, sang something no one recognized, a lullaby that didn't rhyme, didn't even sound like a song, just whispers, fragments, the only language a mother can speak when goodbye is coming too soon. Then, just before the baby was taken, Sarah made one request. Give her to someone who won't tell her how she was born. That request was honored. The baby was placed in state custody and adopted within 4 months by a couple in Missouri. Her identity was sealed, her past erased at least on paper. No one ever told her what really happened. Not the scandal. Not the trial. Not the truth. She would grow up in a quiet home, with new parents, a new name, and no memory of the prison walls where she was born. But the rest of the world remembered. True crime forums debated the case for years. Was Sarah a monster or a martyr? Did Ethan deserve punishment, or was she simply unwell? Documentaries were made. A podcast dedicated an entire season to the case. An anonymous guard who once worked with Sarah gave an interview, saying, "She was always so quiet. You'd never think she had it in her." And Lena Cole. She raised Mason alone. He stopped drawing pictures of his dad by age 7. By 11, he asked why they never visited the cemetery. She told him the truth, or at least her version of it. That man wasn't who you thought he was. And that was all she said. Years passed. The name Sarah Whitmore faded from headlines. But inside Stonebrook State Penitentiary, she remained. Inmate number 87491. 25 years to serve. No visitors. No appeals. Just 4 gray walls, a steel bed, and a single photograph taped to the inside of her locker, the only one she had. A baby girl wrapped in a hospital blanket. Eyes closed. Mouth open, mid-cry. The last time Sarah had held her, the only thing left of Ethan Cole and of the woman Sarah used to be. And as she lay down each night, arms across her chest, she whispered the same sentence to the ceiling above. "If I couldn't have the truth, neither could he." Final narration for closing the video. Some stories don't end with justice. Some don't end with clarity, or closure, or redemption. Sometimes, all that's left is a ruined life, a broken heart, and a child who never asked to be part of any of it. A forbidden love, a hidden betrayal, a murder wrapped in silence. And a question no one could ever answer. Was it love or possession? You've just watched one of the most haunting cases to ever unfold inside prison walls. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think, hit that subscribe button for more real stories that go far beyond the headlines. Thank you for watching.